You have a second brain. It's not a metaphor, it's real, and it is in your gut right now, making decisions without you realizing it. Scientists spent decades ignoring this, but now they know the truth. 90% of the serotonin in your body does not come from the brain in your head. 90%. It comes from down there. And that changes everything about how you understand your emotions, your mood, and even your decisions. For a long time, the gut was seen as just a tube that digests food, nothing more. But when researchers began mapping the enteric nervous system, they found something disturbing. 500 million neurons, more than in the spinal cord. These neurons do not just exist, they communicate, they process information, they operate independently without needing instructions from the main brain, and they influence almost everything you feel. The enteric nervous system, that is the official name of the second brain. It lines the entire gastrointestinal tract, from the esophagus to the large intestine, more than 9 meters of neural tissue. This system was discovered in the 19th century, but no one took it seriously until recently. Scientists thought it only controlled digestion, muscle contractions, enzyme secretion, basic functions. They were wrong. The enteric nervous system processes emotions, responds to stress, and even stores visceral memories. When you feel a knot in your stomach before a presentation, it is not just psychological anxiety. It is the second brain reacting to perceived danger. It has its own reflexes, its own activation patterns, and it can function completely disconnected from the cranial brain. Cut the vagus nerve which links the two brains, and the gut continues operating normally. It does not need permission. Serotonin production. This is where it gets unsettling. 90% of the serotonin in the human body is manufactured in the gut, not in the brain. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter that regulates mood, sleep, appetite, and the feeling of well-being. When you take antidepressants like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the drug acts in the brain, but most of the serotonin that exists in you is being produced by specialized cells in the intestinal lining called enterochromaffin cells. These cells detect nutrients, detect toxins, and release serotonin when necessary. Intestinal serotonin does not cross the blood-brain barrier. It does not reach the brain directly, but that does not mean it does not affect your mood. It influences the vagus nerve. It modulates inflammation. It alters communication between the gut and the brain through complex pathways scientists are still mapping. People with irritable bowel syndrome often have abnormal levels of intestinal serotonin. People with depression do as well. The connection is real. The gut-brain axis. This is the bidirectional communication system between the two brains. It is not a one-way street. The brain sends signals to the gut through the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system. The gut responds and sends signals back. But the gut also starts conversations. It sends information about inflammation, about the presence of pathogens, about nutritional status, and the brain adjusts behavior based on that. Studies with rats show that altering the gut microbiota changes animal behavior. Rats that are normally anxious become calmer when they receive fecal transplants from calm rats. The opposite also happens. Calm rats become anxious with bacteria from stressed rats. In humans, preliminary evidence suggests that probiotics can reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression in some individuals, not in everyone, but in some. The gut microbiota produces neurotransmitters, GABA, dopamine, short-chain fatty acids that cross the blood-brain barrier and affect neural function. The gut is not passive. It is shaping who you are. The stress response. When you face a threat, the brain activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Cortisol is released. Heart rate increases. But the gut also reacts immediately. The enteric nervous system slows digestion, redirects blood flow, releases serotonin and other signaling molecules. In situations of chronic stress, this intestinal response becomes dysfunctional. Intestinal permeability increases. Bacteria and toxins leak into the bloodstream, activating systemic inflammation. This inflammation affects the brain. It is linked to depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Chronic stress damages both the brain and the gut, and because the two are connected, the damage amplifies. A problem in one system worsens the other. It becomes a negative feedback cycle. Visceral memory. Have you ever felt nausea when smelling something that once made you sick? That is visceral memory. The gut stores associations between stimuli and physical reactions. These are not conscious memories. You do not deliberately remember, but the second brain remembers. It learned that smell, that taste, that food caused discomfort, and it prepares a defensive response before you make a conscious decision. This kind of learning happens through sensory neurons in the gut that detect chemical and physical changes. They adapt. They modify their sensitivity based on past experiences. That is why food aversions can last for years. The conscious brain may forget. The gut does not forget. The influence of the microbiota. Trillions of bacteria live in your gut. They are not silent passengers. They produce chemical substances that affect the enteric nervous system and, through it, the brain. Some bacteria produce GABA, the main inhibitory neurotransmitter of the brain. Others produce tyramine and phenylethylamine, compounds that influence mood. The composition of the microbiota changes with diet, medications, stress, and sleep. When microbial diversity decreases, the function of the gut-brain axis deteriorates. Studies associate dysbiosis, which is microbial imbalance, with conditions such as autism, Parkinson's disease, and depression. The cause is still being investigated, but the correlation is consistent. Manipulating the microbiota through diet, probiotics, or fecal transplants is emerging as a possible therapy for neurological and psychiatric disorders. The results are still preliminary, but the direction is clear. What you eat does not only feed you, it feeds an ecosystem that influences your brain. The sensation of hunger. You think you decide when you are hungry, but the second brain actively participates in that decision. Hormones like ghrelin and leptin are released by the gut and by adipose tissue. They signal to the brain about energy levels. But the enteric nervous system also detects nutrients directly. It responds to the presence of glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids in the intestine, and it sends signals to the brain through the vagus nerve telling it how much you have eaten, what type of nutrients are present, and whether you should keep eating or stop. In people with metabolic dysregulation, this communication fails. The gut sends incorrect signals. The brain interprets them poorly. You feel hungry even when you have already eaten enough, or you do not feel hunger when you should eat. Obesity and eating disorders are not only psychological problems, they are problems of the gut-brain axis. Chronic abdominal pain. Millions of people suffer from abdominal pain without any identifiable structural cause. Tests show no ulcers, infections, or tumors, but the pain is real. It comes from an overactive enteric nervous system. Intestinal neurons become hypersensitive. They respond to normal stimuli, such as distension or contractions, with intense pain signals. This sensitization can be caused by previous infections, chronic stress, or changes in the microbiota. And because the gut is connected to the brain, abdominal pain is often accompanied by anxiety and depression.
not because the person is imagining the pain, but because the two systems are interconnected. Treating only the gut does not solve it. Treating only the brain does not solve it either. Both must be addressed. Your gut is not just a tube. It is a thinking organ. It feels, it remembers, it influences every aspect of your existence. 90% of your serotonin is down there, not up here. And the more we learn about the second brain, the more we realize that ignoring it was a mistake of centuries. Take care of your gut. It is taking care of you, whether you know it or not. If this changed how you see your body, the next video will change how you see your mind.